Welcome back to the Growth Hacking Culture podcast. Today, we are tackling a critical issue on why so many innovation initiatives stall despite the best intentions. Think about it. The average lifespan of us S&P 500 company has fallen from 60 years in the 50s to less than 20 years today, largely due to a failure to innovate. This highlights the urgent need for effective ways to nudge across an organization and fast. Many companies leverage on the innovation catalyst, and many also fail to get clear outcomes out of this innovation catalyst. And man, the money that you spend in creating this innovation catalyst. So the big questions that we have today is how do we ensure that they succeed? We are joined today by Jeppe Hansgaard, an expert in organizational transformation and innovation strategy. Jeppe has spent years helping companies bridge the gap between innovation, aspiration, and reality, focusing on the human element of change. He's also the CEO of Innovisor, and Jeppe is the author of a groundbreaking book, Another Change Fiasco. Now, what? Oh, I can easily imagine this sentence in Danish, by the way. Today, we are going to be diving into why organizations struggle to effectively utilize innovation catalyst and what are the common pitfalls, the misalignments of expectations companies have when hiring these catalysts, the qualities and skills that companies should look for. We're going to discuss also about how to practically create a roadmap for them in the first 90 days. Define their missions and objectives. We are going to discuss about my favorite topic, which is the application of behavioral science for better execution and how to motivate these crucial change agents. Jeppe, I am so glad to have you today because that questions about innovation catalyst, it was one of my key questions. And I hope that in this episode, we are going to be discussing real, practical, and tangible advices from your side. Jeppe, thank you for being with me today.
Thank you. I'm really looking forward to this. It's going to be fun. Thank you.
Let's dig a little bit more and define why do you think that so many organizations struggle to effectively utilize this innovation catalyst? And by the way, why so many consultants advise wrongly about how to effectively do it?
Well, see, that's two different questions here, right? So let's take the first one. I think the way I see it, a lot of companies think that innovation is a one-man game, but it is actually a game. It's a team's game, right? And I think that's really the first thing. You think you can hire in an innovation catalyst, then you can sit back, leave them over there in the corner, and then they will innovate for you. Bring this brand new innovation that will bring you into the future, right? And I can just tell you that's not the case. That's not the way innovation works, right? It didn't work like that for Edison, and it doesn't work like that for any other company as well, right? It's always a team's game. So that's the first thing. So what about the? I think you said the consultants, right?
Exactly. They are the ones advising, let's do an innovation catalyst. In any change management plan, you will see this catalyst somewhere, but then in the execution is where everything gets fucked up.
Yeah, no, so I think, and then I hate shooting in the direction of fellow consultants, right? One thing I think that happens is that they forget the system. I mean, nothing happens unless the system, and by the system, I mean the organization takes ownership over what you are going to do. So kind of pushing, training, programs run by consultants, etc., into the organization is never going to make you succeed. I mean, I had a really nice friend in Germany who said to me that change by representation does not work. Change by representation, by that he means where you push in consulting companies, groups of consultants to do your work for you. If you do that, your organization will see that you're not treating it seriously as a leader, right? So they will not support it and back it as you hope they will. So change by representation does not work. What actually does work is to have an executive coach, an executive advisor running next to you and guiding you in the right direction, right? But it's important that you take ownership, that you need to communicate what you're trying to achieve, you need to role model what you're trying to achieve, and you need to be there over time, right? Because most companies, they fail, they really fail to stay on top of what they're trying to do, right? They launch it, leave it, and then they forget it.
Hmm.
And then you're not succeeding.
It is almost like they believe that because they have identified people who has influence and experience, that this will work on its own. But somehow I have the impression that it is like the expectations on what this person should be doing are
Yes.
completely wrong. They got objectives, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no. So I see the innovation catalyst as a completely different role. I see them as facilitators of getting people together. I wrote down 3 words here before we started to talk. So creating a culture where people openly can share ideas, connecting people to each other so they can share their ideas, and then driving a change. And I think these 3 words are really what characterizes a brilliant innovation catalyst. It's not about the person; it's about them facilitating the change, the culture, and the connectivity. And they cannot do it on their own. They need the leadership to be on their side to achieve it.
Mm. You say that a very interesting word that very often I don't see in the job description of this innovation catalyst is culture,
Yeah,
because it is not about pushing the agenda of change, if it is like a digitalization or whatever product you want to create, is not to push this agenda. It is to create a culture.
yeah,
Culture is not really doing directly with about the reason for change or the trigger of
no,
change. And that's something that is completely forgotten. It's about culture, right? The small little things behind, the mindset behind, and not just about, yeah, we are changing with a mega system today and people needs to buy it. No, it's not that.
we're still humans, right? So I think, and we tend to forget that right now. And I might again kicking someone here. Everybody's talking about AI,
Mm, yeah.
but AI is not going to succeed unless you get the humans to accept it, right, and adopt it and actually work with it. And I think that's where everybody's missing the point right now. It's still about the humans.
Mm,
And I had another thing I shared here last week was that I have lots of clients talking about customer centricity right now. How can we get closer to the clients, right? And then they build an AI bot or whatever, right? In reality, I think the true differentiator of the future is actually to make it human.
mm,
Because I mean, the two of us, right? Why is that we enjoy talking right here? It's because we're humans, right? I can see your facial impressions. I've learned about your stories from the past that you lived in Copenhagen and all of that already. And I mean, that's what I enjoy, and that's where the connection is creative.
mm.
And I think we tend to forget that. It's really about being human.
That's one thing. Tell me, is there a way to identify this the characteristics of a good characteristics and skills that a good innovation catalyst should have?
Yes.
What would it be? I mean, we talk about humanity, but when we talk about humanity, that's the thing, something that we have in common, but there is
Yeah.
that can create this connection, this trust. But there is
Yeah.
also something that put us together, is that we have this easy to resistance to change. We don't like change. In fact,
No.
it's not that we are going to resist it. I'm going to procrastinate for hours in order to do something different. And people, when you throw them into a change, they are going to be resistant unless, as you said, there is a more collaborative environment where they feel part of the solution to bring up ideas.
You have two things here, actually. I want to comment a bit later on. Don't like change. I'm not sure I totally agree. But let's say the characteristics here, right? So first of all, a catalyst for a new thing, if it's innovation or a change or digital transformation or whatever, I mean, they're almost always the same. So it's the same type of people we're looking for. And those people are often not immediately visible to leaders, which makes it interesting, right? Because leaders tend to think, okay, it's probably someone who's outspoken, extrovert, speaking up in town hall meetings, or very visible on the internal collaborative channels or whatever. And it's probably also someone that has been with us for a long time, or maybe someone we've hired actually from the total outside in as, okay, you're going to be the new innovation champion, which is probably the worst thing you can do. Or it's someone that is sitting high up in the hierarchy, right? And it's not that, right? So what is it? It is. I sometimes draw like a two. Do you know what it is? Yeah, of course you do. You are a consultant too. I draw a 2x2, right? And then I said, okay, you got on one side, and then now it's the left for me. It's probably the right for you. I'm not sure, but sympathetic and unsympathetic, and you got competent and less competent.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if you have a problem, where would you go to get advice for that? Or if you have an idea you want to develop or get backup for, where would you go? You would go to someone you find sympathetic and competent. And probably trustworthy as well, actually. That's the third characteristic. But let's stay with sympathetic and competent, right? And you will never go to someone you find less competent and non-sympathetic. Why would you ever go in that direction, right? I mean, I know very few humans that would actually seek out someone that they really dislike. But the key thing really in understanding how people connect to each other, and then this is relevant for innovation as well, is what if the competent and sympathetic person is not around? Where do they go then? Do they go to the person that is less competent but sympathetic, or do they go to the competent, unsympathetic person? So you got the choice now, right? And the interesting thing is that most leaders will go to the latter. So the competent, unsympathetic, at least that's what they claim about. So that's one group, right? But almost all employees will go to the person they find sympathetic, even though it's less competent. Because why would they talk to someone where they get a rude comment back? I mean, who wants that? So in organizations, being sympathetic actually beats competent. So that's important, right? Then you can say, so I also just kicked a bit on new people. So new people, they don't really know the networks of the organization, the informal networks, who to go to for help and advice. Who is it that people seek out when they have a problem? That's something you learn over time. You learn that over time by asking questions, by listening to it, and by observing. And I mean, in our data, it takes up to 2 years really before you really know who it is that you should go to. I've seen American organizations, and so very big companies that we're all aware of who are. And in their case, it takes on average 4 years before just people are average in their networks. So it takes a long time before you really are in there and understand what is going on. You can, of course, accelerate that by mapping the network, but I mean, in most cases, you don't know what it is that you're looking at. And if you're then expected to bring change within a short period, when you have been hired in as this outside expert, you almost set up for failure right away.
Yeah, but this story about identifying the networks in certain cultures, it might be easy. Like I'm thinking even in Danish people, they're a little bit tribal somehow, and everybody's quite informal. They know about family and all the stuff. So it might be easy to identify between these Danes, to identify the informal networks. But then you go into the Americans. As you say, it's a little bit more transactional. It's a little bit more temporary. Depending on the situation, it will be that person, but for another situation will be another person. Exactly. How do you identify the networks, especially
you basically do it
who
in the
don't
same
know
way.
it?
So we've been doing this in 70 different countries by now, or plus 70 different countries by now, and networks, how people relate to each other, are almost universal, right? I think this goes all the way back to the monkeys and how they relate to each other. So monkeys, they get together in groups of up to 150 maximum. If you're familiar with the Dunbar rule, that's the way. That's kind of the maximum number of people you can have meaningful relations to. And I mean that is no different in Japan than it is in Denmark or in the Americas, right? So it's the same thing. What is different is how much we rely on hierarchy. But I mean, when we try to identify these catalysts, we remove the hierarchy because we want to get to this thing that is happening outside the hierarchy to understand this. And I mean, what we have found out is that if we get to like the right 3% of catalysts across an organization, they actually impact around 90% of their colleagues. So we want to find those 3%, right? That's important. And they're really important if we want to drive change, because we cannot drive it through the hierarchy. If we talk about the numbers of the hierarchy, it's typically around 10 to 11% that are somehow in a leadership position. And now I include people managers, right? So 10 to 11%. And if we look at those 10 to 11%, they impact on average about 50% of the people. So I said 3% and 90, or 10, 11, and 50. So if I only run my change through the hierarchy, right, my success is like flipping the coin. Oh, is it tails? Sorry, you failed, right? So that's how it is. Whereas if you run it together with the people over here, your odds of succeeding are much, much higher. And you have to remember that those people over here, right, they have the influence regardless of you're working with them or not. So I mean, it is here. You can ignore it, but it's here still, right? It is happening all the time.
You made me think about this adoption model where there is, I think it is close to 3% that we call early adopters when you launch a product for the masses. But the differentiation might be that these early adopters are already hooked into the change itself. They want to change all the time. But in change, does it have to that these catalysts, do they want change, or they just have all the qualities and loyalty that makes that they will do whatever it takes to make their company, their organization survive?
Yeah. So I also, when we talk about early adopters, I draw 3 circles like in a Venn diagram, right? So I have one circle where I say, okay, so who are the early adopters? They might not have influence. So early adopters, that's one circle. Then you got another circle where we have the people with influence, the 3% I talked about before. And then I draw a third circle, which is about who raises their hand, who wants to be involved, really, right?
Yeah.
If you look at the overlap between those 3 circles, you got 7 different stakeholder groups. Very interesting stakeholder groups, right? Because the early adopters, you want to make sure they know what, I mean, they get to play with stuff, right? So if it's digital transformation, make sure they get to play with it, right? They will give you the feedback, even though they are actually booked for a game between whatever in the Champions League where they're actually supposed to be spectators, right? Because they love this so much, they will prioritize the time for it, right? The 3%, you just want to make sure they do not resist what you're doing. So you want to keep them in the know so they're not working against you. That's really what it is, right? You talked about the resistance before, right? This is what it is. Make sure they know enough so they work with you. And then you got the last group, right? You'll always have those people that will raise their hand and say, yeah, I want to be with you. And I mean, you always have those in the organization. Not necessarily the ones that will make you innovate like the early adopters, and not necessarily the ones that will make the change succeed. But they're important, right? Because they're resources. So I always remember the story about Napoleon when he went to war. I don't know, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but he had this line of people in front. He knew he could, I mean, it was okay they got shot. This is a bit horrible, actually. But he had them
French
in the front. What?
French people.
You know, it's crazy, right? So he had them in the front line because this was in the old days, right? You didn't have the rifles you have now where you can kind of just do all the time. So in this case, people would have to reload the gun, right? And that would take you a minute or so, right? So he put those people in the front. They could be wasted basically, right? And then when they got shot, he had the second line standing ready to shoot all the good people from the opponent. That's what you do with those people, the people that have the resources, right? You use them for those things that nobody else is doing, right? So if it's about testing digital tools or whatever it is, right? Use them as much as possible. Make sure you involve them. Make sure you communicate to the early adopters, right? Because they should give you the feedback you need on what you're doing because they love what you're doing, right? And then make sure the 3%, the informal influencers, are not resisting what you're doing because they can really derail your initiative if they do not support it. And that's what I actually mean with the people don't like change. I actually think that people are okay with change. I think what we do wrong when we run changes, we tend to over focus on resistance. I think we're much better off in focusing on where is the tailwind. Because if you think about behavioral change, right, what you really need to get to is you need to get to about 30% backing your change. And you need to get there fast. Because if you don't get there fast, resistance will build up and people say, no, this is not a good thing. But if you get there fast with the early adopters and maybe with the help of those informal influences, then the resistance will just break down. I'll give you another example of that. We work with a large technology company, about 16,000 people. They had some areas of focus. AI was one of them, right? Cloud, and etc. Right? And they wanted to create these centers of excellence at the headquarters, right? And of course, they thought they knew who were the experts to include in that center of excellence at the headquarters. So now they had 100 offices, right? And I had the sense that that's probably not the case. Maybe we should just ask people, who is it that they go to for expertise related to these areas here? We asked 3 simple questions. So the first question we asked people in the organization was, and this was to save time, so are you working with any of these 6 priority areas? And if they said no, they didn't they didn't answer any more questions, right? If they said yes, it was classic radio button. If they said yes, then the next question was, okay, so you say you're working with AI. How much time do you spend on this during a classic work week? And they could say 10%, it could be 50. Suddenly you kind of had a feeling of, okay, how much time are we actually investing in this across our entire organization? 16,000 people, and they were shocked about how much time it was. It was not just a small little thing over here, right? It was a lot of time being spent on this because almost everyone spent 5 or 10% of their time on this. Good. And then the third question, which is really the best question, is, that's good. So you spend so much time, and who do you consider to be the expert within our organization, within this area here, right? And it was not people at headquarters. And in this case here, I will always remember it because for AI especially, it was a person sitting in a 30-man office in Nottingham. And they had no clue who that person was at headquarters. Never heard about him before. But everybody in the informal networks, they knew when they were asking across the table, who should I ask for help related to AI? Go to this person. Everybody pointed to him. It was kind of the wisdom of the crowd. Everybody, when they talked to each other, that was the person, right? So the question is then, what do you do as an organization? Do you then say, we cannot have this guy in Nottingham, and we want to build it in headquarters? And they actually did something which I think was very clever. They decided to go with the flow. So rather than turning around the river, they said, well, this is the direction of where people are going in the organization. So let's make sure we make that person in Nottingham competent, because you don't even know if he was competent, right? He was just a person that people were asking for help. Maybe he was just helpful. And maybe he knew what was going on 3 years ago and he had no clue now, right? But now they actually made sure that he had the right competencies and he had somebody sitting around him to support him when he got all of these requests. And then they promoted him internally in like TED-like sessions, so like TED Talks.
Yeah.
So now it was evident to the entire organization, if you have anything with AI, this is the direction you're going. And it was extremely successful. So rather than building something up over here, right, in headquarters, do it out there with the people.
Now I understand a little bit better something that struck me on what you say, that when you are talking about nudging an organization, it's not that the focus should be about this innovation catalyst, this 3%, but you need to have a plan for different type of populations. And
Yes.
that plan is most of the time inexistent. Because of course, in change, you are going to have people who don't agree on the change, and they need to be involved because they can be major roadblockers.
Yes.
They may not have the expertise, but they may have the influence to turn off a lot of people in the organization, and that's very often forgotten. That leads me to a question that I have, to another challenge with this innovation catalyst, is about the onboarding. So how does it look like the typical onboarding, let's say, when you start as an innovation catalyst, 30 days later, maybe 60 or 90 days later, is there a specific way that you would recommend to do it?
Yeah. I actually describe a bit of the model in another Change Fiasco. I think it's really, really important that you're not dictating to these people what they should think. You actually need to create the connection to them first. So I always say the first thing you do when you are trying to onboard them, as you say, is actually you listen to them. You listen. I say you listen, because by listening to them and chatting with them, you create a connection. And it's in that connection that trust is actually happening, where they will share their feedback and their concerns and their ideas with you. You need to get to that point first. So the activation is really about building trust first. And then when you have done that, then start to engage them into activities that they care for themselves, make them co-create with you, make them collaborate with you, and whatever. The best thing you can do is having them so involved so they become insiders. Because if they are insiders on what you're trying to achieve as an organization, right, then they will speak your case at the water cooler. I know we do not have the water cooler anymore, but they will speak your case when they talk to all those people that are actually looking to them for advice. And I think that's the point here, right? And so leaders, they need to remember that those people actually trusted much more than themselves, right? So I think it was the Edelman Trust Barometer that at a certain point in time of some years ago did some research on who are the most trusted people who are the most trusted people. And it was peers, so people like yourself. It was not leaders, it was not politicians.
No.
But it was people like yourself, right? And that is what those people are. It's people like yourself.
Very often, and I'm coming with plenty of challenges that I have observed, because I really wanted to nail it down completely. Very often, organizations give the accountability of being an innovation catalyst to a person, but it's the thing that they do on top of the day-to-day work.
Yes.
So it is very difficult to give importance to something if you have to do it on top. Because
that's impossible.
Not like you have less shit to do. No, it is like make more.
Yeah.
In general, I have the impression that the definition of the mission and objective of this innovation catalyst very often sucks. What's your take on that?
Well, first of all, I do believe that I mean, some of our analysis on projects over time, over the past 15 years, right, has shown when is it that organizations fail. And we got this, we call it the 6 change blockers. And I've wrote another book about that actually, which is called Change is Gridlock, Now What? But if you look at the 6 change blockers, right, the last one that is really speaking into what you're talking about here is the project team. So do they have the mandate they need, and do they have the time they need to really succeed, right? And again, if I think about what I see a lot is that many organizations, they come to that point of launching it, but they forget that these people, they actually need to succeed over time.
Mm.
And when they forget that these people need to succeed over time, they forget that they need to have direct contact to the leaders. So when something unexpected happens, they can actually get new resources in, or, I mean, a new plan or whatever, right? So that you need to make sure they have direct access to the executive sponsor. I tell you, this almost never happens, right? So you find someone and then you hide them somewhere in the corner of a warehouse maybe, and that's where they're sitting. I was working with a US organization, and I really want to say it's one of the best organizations I've worked with. And oh man, I got a good story about that one. But the person they had to be in charge of this, he was actually, his title was the Innovation Catalyst. Brilliant title, right? He was sitting alone in a building on the 3rd floor as the only person. And they had 20 buildings in that area, right? So how did he create connectivity, right? And then he tried to invite people into his room. And it was, I mean, it was crazy really, right? Because his chance of connectivity was limited. It was all based on his past track record, where he could kind of bring people in that he already knew, or they could connect him to. But he was almost set up for failure right away, right? So you have a project team set up for failure if you do not really make sure they get the time and the resources, etc., to do stuff.
Oh,
The fun story about this one, and this is actually a great story. So this company was really struggling with innovation. and they really needed to do something, right? Then the CEO has this brilliant idea. He had heard about all the good things happening in Silicon Valley. So he had this brilliant idea of bringing a team in from Silicon Valley. So they hired, I think, 25 to 30 people from Silicon Valley at one go.
mm-hmm.
Just imagine the cost of this, right? Move them to this place in the rural parts of the United States and make them responsible for innovation. What happens? So these 25 to 30 people, right? They move to this place together with the families. Who are they connecting to? They're connecting to each other, right? Because they're kind of outsiders. They really do not belong in the area, right? And then they sit there. And when we did our analysis of the networks, we just see, well, you had just created, or they had just created a cluster inside the company that was totally detached from everybody else.
Mm.
And that's not the way you create success, right? For innovation, you need to make sure it's kind of connected to the organization. So big failure actually, but it's an amazing story, right? And who thinks that they can just bring in people from the outside, from this place over here, and bring it in, and then they will succeed? I mean,
Jeppe, don't be astonished. I have seen it already a couple of times, this story. I have seen it when they bring people from tech companies, even though they are
yes,
the
exactly.
outsiders, and they stay the outsiders, and they leave the company after 2 years succeeding nothing. And I have seen also creating satellites inside of the Silicon Valley, which is another thing that, boops, the guy was just meant to send reports every week. That's it.
Yeah.
He was paid for that. Send reports, and that nobody was reading, or a limited number of people was reading.
No, but that is true, right? The digital transformation is another thing, right? Yeah, now we want digital transformation, or we want AI, right? We find someone from the outside, put them in, lock them in their room, right? And then they can sit there and think, and nothing happens, right? And that's why I go back to, it's systemic. It's about change, it's about culture, and it's about connectivity if you want to succeed.
Yeah. But let's pitch a little bit more about consultants, because very often when companies are
You're a
looking,
consultant, right? I just want to make sure that
well, let's bitch about ourselves.
yeah,
Let's do
okay. I'm a consultant too, so we can beat ourselves.
it. Very often when companies require external help, there is the problem that the definition of that consultant might be that he is a person to drive improved processes,
Yeah.
or I don't know, a specialist in technology. And very little consultancy companies have an expertise in one area that is enhanced or improved by the knowledge of the human psychology. Because you don't want either to have a complete team of psychologists, because that will end up in a little bit on a chaos.
Yes.
And that's the thing that I wanted to ask you is that I know that you use some principles of behavioral science in order to make that humans are influencing other humans. I mean, behind this story of creating change is about humans that are empowered in order to nudge others to want to do it on their own. So this story of nudging is not like some people has it, but you still need to groom it a little bit, improve it, like teach them a little bit. So according to you, what are the tips from behavioral science that we can use in order to better influence, better get use of that resource called innovation catalyst?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of tips that I always give, and the first thing is don't think you know.
Mm.
So if you go any leader, right? A lot of leaders they think they know, but I mean nobody knows. You have limited visibility in how people connect to each other, and if you just can accept that fact, then you have already done a lot better. Then the second trick that I'm always recommending leaders to do is, well, just to make sure or to build your own picture of what is going on in the organization, right? Every time you meet with a person, ask them, who do you go to for help and advice in relation to this? Or who gives you energy in your daily work life, right? Or who could make you more effective? Just ask these questions because those are people questions where you're trying to uncover relationships. And those relationships, that's where the innovation happens, right? Because people are never, as I was trying to demonstrate before when I talked about the sympathetic, competent people are never going to innovate together with someone they find is a jerk, really, right? Why would they do that?
Mm.
So they want to do it together with people they like, or they care for, or they find trustworthy. And it's pretty simple. So to understand that, leaders need to ask those questions. It requires a bit more humble attitude. And then the second thing I'm always saying, if it really is right, and leaders need to remember they need to get their hands dirty, right? They need to be involved, right? You cannot just launch it and then forget about it. I think it's about, in our numbers again, it's about 80% of leaders that after they've launched their change initiative, digital transformation, post-merger integration or whatever, right? 3 months later, they're not following up on it anymore. And then you fail. I mean, and it is so simple. And if you want to create innovation, it's not a quick fix.
Do you have the impression that innovation catalysts need to be trained as part of their onboarding program into new skills in order to do better, or we just need to let them do?
Trained is a good question, right? So I do think there are certain things where you can help them become better. I'm not so happy with the word training because it almost sounds like, okay, you sit there and then you get a diploma. Now you are like a yellow belt innovation catalyst, or you are whatever black belt innovation catalyst or whatever, right? I don't really believe in that. I think a lot of it is about the person and their human skills. But of course, there are structures and templates that are good to know.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I'm not
Exactly.
sure if that helps, but I think reading about it, talking about it, and doing it. I think doing it is really where you get the most learning out of it, right?
Hmm. Indeed. Um, Last challenge. This is a story about rewards. So, how do we say thank you to these guys who are investing maybe extra time, who are going around and with spending time with people? Is there a good motivator for innovators, or we should leave it like the reward is the job?
Hmm. So I think most of the time, so when in the way we work with it, you have actually been pointed to by your peers. So it's because your peers think you have what it takes. That is an incredible reward. I can tell you that you actually, your peers see you as someone that can actually help. It really is, right? So I'm normally not saying you need to pay them or whatever, right? And or you need to promote them, because the worst thing you can actually do is promote them afterwards, right? If you promote people into this role, you take them out of the informal networks. In the same second you promote them, you take them away from what they actually are part of, right? It becomes an us and them dilemma. So I don't see that. I mean, you should of course say thank you. I think it is like, again, being a good human here, right? How do you say thank you? How do you acknowledge that they're doing something good? And I think that is probably the best thing you can do.
Hmm. You're right. In fact, very often I have seen that this recognition, when people are saying thank you and mentioning why, in fact, in front
Yeah,
of other people, that's a good recognition. Very often I have noticed also these innovation catalysts are not the ones who are into the pipeline of high profile talent to be the next CEO, but they want to be recognized finally because they spend time maintaining these relationships, giving advices and tips. It is something that is necessary in organizations.
yeah. No, so I actually say thank you and then give them feedback on how their input has worked, right?
Yeah,
Good or bad, just tell them how it worked, right? And tell them the difference it has made, right? And I think that is important. We forget the feedback very often.
yeah, you're right. Um, Jeppe, it was a really interesting conversation. I found it very practical. I really like the fact that you mentioned a little bit of your real experience. It's not a theoretical exercise, and you haven't used complicated words that McKinsey would use in every single slide. Tell
No.
me, how do people reach you out? Uh, what is the best way so that they reach you out to ask you questions about not only innovation, but also the human side of the innovation? My
Yeah,
understanding is that your company is global. It's not
yeah.
in little Denmark with us. How many millions you have now? Eight? In
Denmark,
the,
I don't know. I think we just passed 6 million. But
okay.
yes, people can reach me. There are two platforms that I am prioritizing right now, and one is LinkedIn. I've been using the platform for many years, but especially in the last 10 years, very soon actually. I've been posting articles on learnings and so forth in the past 10 years. It is more than 200 articles, I think. Always like short reads, like I don't know. But when I do that, then I'm also starting to be active on Blue Sky.
Oh, yes, that's a good one. Me
Yeah,
too.
no, so I'm moving over on Blue Sky here. I have 3,000 followers on X, but I mean the one that I promote is Blue Sky. And then, and I mean, apart from that, we got two things I really want to emphasize. We have a club where people that kind of share our beliefs. They meet once per month to discuss in a physical meet, or not in a physical, but in a virtual meeting. But apart from that, they also discuss these topics here throughout the month, but just in a virtual way, right?
Mhm.
So the club meets every third Thursday of the month at 3 o'clock Central European time. It includes by now 50 professionals from all over the world that are actually meeting to discuss these things. It's a brilliant setup. Uh, They learn and develop. They decide on the topics they want to discuss. This month it is about. Sorry, 2 months ago it was about hybrid work, how you organize that best possible. Last month it was about governance. This month, due to International Women's Day, they talk about, okay, how can we actually get to real action rather than just making it into a one-day effort. And then so that's the club. And then of course I got all the books, right. I've written 4 books. First one is called Another Change Fiasco. Now what? It's a playbook. I wanted to say it is written for professionals. It's not like the classic academical book. It is practical experiences and stories and anecdotes and data. Then the second one is called Connectivity is Broken Now What, which really speaks into what you see in society now, where people are almost moving into different camps and then throwing stupid things at each other rather than thinking about what actually unites us and connects us. So that's the second one, the second playbook. And the third one I also mentioned is called Change is Gridlock Now What? I wrote these 3 books in a very, very short time. I mean, it was really about getting all of the knowledge that I've generated over the past 15, 20 years into 3 books so people could use it. And then while I was doing it, a good friend in Canada, his name is Hilton Barber, was interviewing some of our past clients on how they work with it. So it was not my words, but their words on how they work with this. And his interviews then got into a book we co-authored, which is called Fix Your Culture, This Is How. And it includes 5 really practical cases from everything from a small trading company in Switzerland, actually, headquartered in Switzerland. It's called Holcim Trading. So it's part of the large Holcim organization. Holcim Trading is working across 3 continents. So it's really interesting case. Then there's a case with a company called Max. Max is like Uber, but just in Africa, which has really scaled up very fast over the last 3-4 years. The third one was Rush, Rush.
Yeah.
And actually it was about how they build cross-organization connectivity amongst innovators. So very interesting case. Fourth one is an engineering company called Covi, which is international. Covi is about 8, 9, 10,000 people. And again, they do change and transformation with the people, not to the people, which is important. And then the last one was a university in California. So 5 different organizations that are really where they speak with their own words. They share how they've done it, and I think that's a brilliant book to look at as well.
Listen, I got all the links now. The Blue Sky one, the link to your Amazon account, so that we can see all of the books, your even your website. But I didn't understand, where can I get more information about the club, because that looks interesting even for me.
Yes. The club, I can share the link with you, but the club, we have it on our website. It says, let me see it. I'm actually not sure where it is. But the club is interesting. And I think everybody who's working with leadership, OD, innovation, whatever, they should be part of this. It's an opportunity to talk with peers, right? Again, which is what I really believe in. Where is it? Yeah, so and it's facilitated by our head of learning and quality and innovation. So he is the guy who's facilitating every time. I take part as many times as possible. So now I'm not familiar with Zoom here, so it's in the chat. There it is.
No, don't worry, I will find it. So in your website, innovisor.com, then
it's in the chat now.
Okay, that's perfect. That facilitates my work. I will put that link because that looks super interesting for a lot of us. Jeppe, thank you very much for your time, your patience to explain me everything that you have mentioned. And it was lovely to finally speak after so many years with a Dane. It was beautiful.
Tack.
Tack ska du ha.
Yeah, thank you.
Have an
Brilliant.
excellent day, Jeppe.
You too.